All right, this is one of those impromptu things that we do every now and then when there's news that merits it. It's kind of the beauty of our digital age and the opportunities we have available to us as far as reaching out and touching someone without any real delay. I mean, a few seconds delay, but not too much to it. And here we are on Sunday night, and when you have a weekend like Pitt just had, you're going to have to get together and talk about it. And we've done this in the past when they've had some big days in recruiting, which Pitt has done a few times over the past couple weeks. And certainly this weekend qualifies. 3 commitments from high school prospects, a graduate transfer who decides to commit to Pitt all in one weekend. The grad transfer on Saturday, 3 high school commitments on Sunday. And I said, man, it's Sunday night. We got to sit down and talk about this. So hope you can tune in here on the live stream. We appreciate that. We'll probably throw this out as a podcast as well, so I appreciate you listening to it. We'll have our regular Tuesday night thing and probably talk a lot about this stuff as well. But, you know, when you have a big day like this, when there is a big day like this for Pitt recruiting, and there's big news to talk about, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about it. And I guess, we'll start with the high school kids on Saturday. And, you know, you might have thought this was Mother's Day. And it was. Can't change that. But it's also going to be remembered as Archie Collins Day. Because Archie Collins goes out and gets 3 recruits on Sunday. And, you know, I think you have to understand, first off, about how, you know, some of these things work. Because we talk so much about coaches who get credit for recruits. Who deserves to get the credit? Is the position coach or an area coach or the head coach, a coordinator? Who... You know, when you say this coach landed that recruit, who do you really talk about? And I think we have to understand is that there are multiple layers at play. So a position coach is definitely going to be involved. So Pitt got 2 offensive linemen and a linebacker on Sunday. And there's no question that Dave Borbley was involved with the offensive lineman. There's no question that Rob Harley was involved with the linebacker. But they're not the only ones. They're not the only guys who are involved with those recruits. You've also got the area coach. Each Pitt coach is assigned a geographic area, and sometimes a couple geographic areas. You know, Corey Sanders does like Philly and South Jersey, and then I think he also has parts of like South Carolina. And he's got a little bit of Western PA. The City League, I think, is largely where he just popped up here on the picture in the live stream. I couldn't have planned that any better. Corey Sanders works, I think, a bit in the City League. He was heavily involved with Dayon Hayes last year. And so, you know, for Dayon Hayes from Westinghouse, defensive lineman, he's got connection with Corey Sanders as his, you know, area recruiter, the guy who recruits anybody at Westinghouse or Brashear or, any school in the City League. I was going to start naming some, but I wasn't sure which ones are still open. So I don't want to, I'm not going to say that he's recruiting Shenley. But then he also has Charlie Partridge, the defensive line coach, who's going to be his position coach. And the idea is you've got multiple layers of coaches interacting with the kids so you can form multiple relationships, increase the strength of that bond and the connection that he's got to the university. So Archie Collins, Pitt's cornerbacks coach and defensive backs coach, handles Georgia for the most part, Atlanta, and Michigan. Michigan, you know, he's from Detroit. He's a Detroit native, and it's where he's been coaching in the past, and that's the area that he's got. And all of Pitt's commitments commitments on Sunday came out of Archie Collins' territory. 1 out of Georgia, a linebacker named Preston Lamont, and then 2 offensive linemen out of Detroit, Terrence Enos and Brandon Honorable. So, yeah, it was Archie Collins' day on Sunday, because he got 3 commitments to join Pitt's 2021 recruiting class, and they all came from his areas. And the first one to go was Preston Lamont. He announced at noon. He committed a little bit before that, but he announced at noon. 6'2", 211, 210-pound linebacker. Picked Pitt over a bunch of offers. His Power 5 options were Louisville, Minnesota, Nebraska, and West Virginia. 6'2", 211. He's an athletic linebacker. He can run well for his size, and that's what he'll tell you. And some schools are recruiting him to play outside, probably like on the weak side linebacker. If it's at Pitt, if he's an outside linebacker at Pitt, he'd probably be that money linebacker, the boundary linebacker. Not as much in terms of coverage responsibilities, more rushing the passer. But it actually sounds like Pitt likes him as an inside linebacker, as a middle linebacker, which you do need to recruit those guys fairly often. You know, you need to recruit guys that you can project to that position specifically, because it takes a certain kind of player to be a middle linebacker. Not everybody can be a middle linebacker in a 4-3 defense. You need a certain type of player, and you need someone that you'd like to have someone that you project to that position from the time you're recruiting them, and not just somebody you move into the middle halfway through his career. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens for Pitt this season, where it looks like Chase Pine is going to be the starter at middle linebacker. At least he'll be the penciled-in starter whenever they actually start training camp. And it'll be interesting to see how he does there. He's got experience playing in the middle, but he's also been an outside linebacker a lot in his career, and I think he was recruited to be an outside linebacker. And so, how does that transition go? Well, Lamont looks like a guy that Pitt is projecting as a middle linebacker right off the bat. And if that doesn't work, I mean, there's also a potential to play, like I say, that boundary linebacker spot, that money linebacker, as they call it in their defense, that outside position. So that was the first commitment, first linebacker commitment for Pitt in this 2021 recruiting class, first commitment out of the state of Georgia in this 2021 recruiting class after Pitt signed a couple last year. Hunter Sellers, the defensive back, and Jalen Barden, the wide receiver, starting to make some inroads in Georgia. This is a good place to make inroads. I think Georgia is one of those kind of under-the-radar states, low-key, one of the better talent-producing states in the country. I mean, you talk about where's the talent for high school football in this nation. I mean, people are inevitably going to say Florida. They're going to say Texas. They're going to say California. I mean, those are kind of the big three. Georgia's not far behind those states. I mean, I think probably, per capita, you look at the 5 stars and the 4 stars they roll out on an annual basis. It may not have the overall numbers of Florida and Texas, but they're up there. They're surprisingly up there. I mean, probably I would put them right behind Florida and Texas in terms of producing talent and ahead of just about anybody else. I mean, no matter, you want to talk about Ohio or, Michigan's solid. Pennsylvania has been strong in the past, although maybe not as much anymore. You want to talk about even the DMV region. I mean, Virginia, I think, is a good area, but it's not as strong as maybe its perception is. And I would contend that Georgia is stronger. And if you're Pitt and you're going out of state to get guys, and you're going into a state like Georgia, look, everybody knows about Georgia. Georgia's right in the middle of the freaking SEC. They have the SEC championship game in Georgia, So you're not going to sneak in there and, it's not a surprise. Everybody knows that Georgia is strong. It's like Maryland. Everybody knows you should go to Maryland because there's good players in Maryland. Everybody knows you should go to Virginia or New Jersey because there are good players in those states. So you're not going to surprise anyone by going to Georgia. But I think there's enough depth of talent in a state like Georgia that it's worth the time and the effort and the resources to go in and recruit, because you'll get a kid like Jalen Barden who slipped through the cracks of the SEC and ends up at Pitt, and I think he's going to be really good at Pitt. I think he's going to have a great career at Pitt. He looks like a stud wide receiver prospect. I think he was a 3-star on recruit on Rivals, but he had a good offer sheet. I think he had some SEC options, and Pitt ends up getting him. And I think there could be SEC schools, other SEC schools down the road that say, geez, why didn't we recruit this kid? He was right here. Well, those are the guys you need to find. Kind of like going into Florida. I mean, you can't go into Florida and expect to get those 5-star recruits because everybody in the country recruits Florida. And I think everybody in the country recruits Georgia, or a lot of people in the country recruit Georgia as well. So you don't walk into high schools in Atlanta and think this 5-star kid is going to be the one I'm going to get. But you're going to find some 4-star guys that you'll have a chance at, and you're going to find a bunch of 3-star guys who are really good players, and you can get it and really build a team with. Add some big pieces to your team. And so that's what Preston Lamont looks like. Like I say, about 6'2", 210-pound linebacker, should fit in well in Pitt's 4-3 scheme. And then you have 2 offensive linemen out of Detroit. And before we talk about them individually, there is the bigger topic of offensive line recruiting. These 2 guys committing gives Pitt 4 offensive linemen in the class. And I feel like, I wrote about this in the 3-2-1 column on Friday on Panther-Lair.com. We probably talked about it on the podcast last Tuesday night. I know I talked about it on Saturday morning on the Panthers Insider Show. We have all these different sort of avenues. These are kind of the big points in my week each week, is I got to get ready for the podcast, in the live stream on Tuesday night. I got to get ready for the 3-2-1 column on Friday. I got to get ready for the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan on Saturday morning. Those 3 things sort of occupy a lot of my brain power as far as generating content ideas. And I mean, like, there's on one hand, you're interviewing recruits and writing news articles, but then in terms of generating conversation topics and discussion and opinions, those are the three big things. And I know one of the things I talked about in at least one, probably two, and possibly all three of those venues was the O-line recruiting and how Pitt hasn't signed more than 2 high school offensive linemen in any of the last 3 classes, 2018, 2019, 2020. They got a lot of guys in 2017, and they have a couple guys in 2019 that'll probably move from other positions to the offensive line. One already has, probably another one is coming. But high school offensive linemen, they signed 2 in the 2018 class, 2 in the 2019 class, and 2 in the 2020 class. For 2021, as we sit here on May 10th, they've got 4 committed. And I'm not entirely convinced that they're done. I think they could go out and get even more offensive linemen because they need to restock the numbers. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. They're taking a lot of players in this class. This is going to be a big recruiting class. 23 kids, 24 kids. Maybe even push the envelope and go to 25 kids. You're going to take that many recruits in a class, you're going to have room to load up on a position like offensive line where you need to boost your numbers. And Pitt needs to boost its numbers. So they've got 4 committed already. Got, irons in the fire on a few other guys. And, potential to get a 5th or maybe a 6th offensive lineman before it's all said and done. So these 2 guys are committed. I forget the order that they committed, but we'll start with Brandon Honorable. He's a 6'6", 280-pound tackle from Martin Luther King High School in Detroit, one of the big schools in Detroit, one of the football powerhouses in Detroit. Avonte Maddox went to King. It's a good school that's turned out a lot of talent, and Brandon Honorable, really good offensive line prospect out of Martin Luther King. He had offers from, Power 5 offers from Indiana, Iowa State, Maryland, Michigan State, Minnesota, Purdue, Syracuse, Tennessee. Good offer sheet for a 6'6", 280-pound tackle, a guy who's athletic, a guy who can move around really well. And I really feel like if you're recruiting offensive linemen, you can find great guard prospects. I always kind of feel like you're best served to recruit as many tackles as you can. Those guys who are athletic enough to play tackle, who can move around out there. And then some of them, maybe the guys who are only 6'4" or 6'5" instead of 6'6", or the guys who are, 6'5" instead of 6'6", or 6'4" instead of 6'5". And the way heights get listed these days, you might have a guy who's listed at 6'5", and he's actually like 6'3". Well, you move, but he can move. You know what I mean? But he can move his feet. He's got good footwork. He's got good agility, good athleticism. You move them inside and have them play guard, or you teach them to snap and have them play center. Get as many tackles as you can. Now, Brandon Honorable looks like a guy who can play outside. He's 6'6", probably every bit of it, and if he's not, he's 6'5". And, 280 pounds, again, really athletic offensive lineman, and a guy who looks like he could probably stick outside, doesn't need to move inside to guard or anything like that. I think he looks like a really good offensive tackle prospect with some pretty good Power 5 offers for Honorable. And then the other one, Terrence Enos from Cass Tech, which is the other big school in Detroit, and they're rivals. And people asked if Honorable and Enos were friends, if their recruitments were going to follow similar paths, or if they're going to influence each other. I actually asked Brandon Honorable about that. I said, well, Terrence, you're going to try and work on him, or you guys have you ever talked about going to Pitt together? And he's like, we don't really talk. He goes to Cass Tech, I go to King, and if we both go to Pitt and we both put on the same uniform, we'll be friends then. But for now, not so much. It's that kind of rivalry between these 2 guys, or between these 2 schools, I should say. It's not necessarily personal between Brandon Honorable and Terrence Enos. It's a rivalry between the 2 schools, and it's a pretty a heated one at that. So Terrence Enos, 6'5", 315, offensive tackle, but here's a guy who potentially, he moves well. He's got that good athleticism that you like to see from a tackle, but potentially move inside or even learn to snap. And I think they even talked about that with, Terrence Rankle, the offensive lineman who committed out of Massillon, Washington High School in Massillon, Ohio. A big kid, big enough to play tackle, athletic enough to play tackle, but Dave Borbley, Pitt's offensive line coach, already told him, look, start working on snapping. Learn how to snap. Not that you're necessarily going to be a center, but I want you to have that versatility, that you could play tackle, you could play guard, or you could play center. Because, look, and this is no disrespect to guys who hold the position, but most, FBS coaches, most D1 coaches will tell you, you shy away from recruiting the guys who play center in high school. And again, no disrespect, but that's just kind of a rule of thumb. You'll find some who are good, but you want, your FBS center, you want your college center to be a guy who moves as well as the guys who are playing tackle in high school. So if you find that guy who moves that well, chances are he's not playing center in high school. He's playing tackle because that's the best spot for a guy who can move like that. They tend to put their shortest, least mobile guys at center in high school. General rule of thumb. I'm overgeneralizing here, and I'm probably making somebody mad who's listening to this, and he's like, man, screw you. I was a center in high school. And look, if you went on and had a great productive Division I, college football career as a center, then all hats off to you, pal. Kudos to you. So no disrespect meant, but that's sort of a general rule of thumb that I didn't come up with. I've heard coaches say it. They've told me that, you shy away from that kind of thing because, you go find tackles, as many tackles as you can, and some of them will play tackle, and some of them will move to guard, and some of them you'll teach to snap, and that would be your ideal scenario. So Terrence Enos, interesting guy, and Terrence Rankle, like I said, all the Terrences, interesting guys because they have some of that versatility. Now, Enos, 3-star prospect on Rivals.com. His Rivals rating is 5.7. At 5.8, you get the 4th star. So that's how close he is to potentially being a 4-star prospect. And I think when you look at his offer sheet, it's not a hard sell to convince yourself that he is a 4-star prospect. He had Power 5 offers from Arkansas, Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas, Kentucky, LSU, Maryland, Ole Miss, Missouri, Purdue, Rutgers, Syracuse, Vanderbilt, and West Virginia. That's a good offer sheet. That's a lot of good Power 5 scholarship offers. And I think they were all legit offers. These schools genuinely wanted to get Terrence Enos on their roster. Well, he's going to Pitt, or at least he's committed to Pitt right now. So, another good addition to the offensive line room. And again, 4 guys now, the 2 Terrences, Brandon Honorable, and then Marco Fugar, who we talked about last week, who is a guard. And they're recruiting to play guard. Potentially, I'm going to guess they would want him to learn to snap as well because, you might as well have guys work on it and get comfortable. Maybe you surprise yourself and find a good center option. You're going to need somebody beyond, this season. You're going to need somebody in 2021 after Jimmy Morrissey graduates. Now, ideally, it wouldn't be anybody in this 2021 class or anybody in the 2020 class. My guess, and this is a different topic for a different day. My guess is that, a guy like Jake Cradle would get looked at as a possible option. They actually recruited Owen Drexel as a center. And I think he played center in high school. So, that thing about not recruiting high school centers is not a 100% hard and fast rule. It's it's sort of a generalization. So, they have a couple options on the roster. You don't want to put a freshman in there as your center, obviously. So, these guys in this 2021 class are not going to come in as freshmen and play right away, these offensive linemen, and they're not going to come in and play at an important position like center, but I think you've got a couple options in there down the road. You've got guys who, almost all of these guys, could play tackle or guard or center. I think Honorable is pretty much a tackle. I think Fugar is pretty much a guard. But the 2 Terrences and Fugar to some extent, I think having versatility to play at center, I think these guys can move around a little bit and play some different spots. So versatility is a good thing to have. Now, the other one to join Pitt this weekend, and this guy joins Pitt right now. He's not coming in the fall of 2021. He's coming right now, and it's Caljic Wilson, a graduate transfer offensive lineman from Hampton. Another offensive lineman, but someone who's going to come in and play for the team right now. He's a graduate transfer. He graduated from Hampton University in Virginia, and he went looking for a home, somewhere to play at the FBS level for his final year of college, and Wilson's got an interesting backstory. He played 2 years of football in high school. He went to high school in North Carolina, Salisbury, North Carolina. I think the high school was West Rowan High School. He played just his junior year and senior year. He felt like he played well, but college coaches weren't sold on his tape, so he ends up going to Hampton. Doesn't play his first couple years. He plays a little bit here and there, makes like 2 starts over his first 3 seasons or something like that. Didn't play at all in 2018. I forget if he was hurt or what happened there, but he didn't play at all in 2018. This past season, he gets on the field. He's healthy. He makes 11 starts and looks good enough that he decides to go in the transfer portal for his final year of eligibility. And college coaches were sold this time around. Obviously, Pitt liked him. They took him. He was also looking strongly at USC. He was looking at Indiana, and he was looking at West Virginia. Those was kind of his 4 finalists: Pitt, USC, Indiana, West Virginia. 6'6", 305-pound offensive tackle. Says he can play right or left. He wants to play left tackle, but he is comfortable playing right tackle or left tackle. And he's a really interesting addition. Pitt's not. So I mean, they're returning 5 players with starting experience on the offensive line, but only one of those guys has starting experience, extensive, multiple starts at tackle, and that's Carter Warren, who started every game last season at left tackle. So they have this opening at right tackle after Nolan Alizio started every game last season as a grad transfer from Michigan, and they have an opening there. But they've also got Carson Van Lin as a redshirt junior who played a lot last season, played a lot the last 2 years. 2 years ago, he was mostly playing as a jumbo tight end. Last season, he played a lot on the offensive line, rotated some with Alizio. Gabe Hoy rotated some with Alizio at right tackle. So they've got guys coming back, but they do have an open starting job. And that's where Wilson fits in. Now, as I think back, this is the 4th year in a row that Pitt has taken a graduate transfer offensive lineman. And 4 years ago that I think Brandon Hodges was going to walk into a starting job, I didn't. Because if you remember, he transferred in from Texas, got to Pitt late, showed up in like August. I don't even think he was ready to practice at the beginning of training camp. I think he was still getting his paperwork figured out. So it was like the 2nd or 3rd week of camp before he even got on the practice field. It might have been the 2nd week. So I didn't think he was going to walk right into a starting job. 2018, Stefano Millen from Kent State. Yeah, I was like, this guy's coming in to start, and he did. And he started 14 games at left tackle. I thought that one was coming. I thought that was going to happen. Nolan Alizio last year, I was firmly in the wait and see camp on where he was going to fit in. I was not entirely convinced when he committed to transfer to Pitt. I was not entirely convinced that he was going to just walk right into a starting job. I thought that competition with guys like Carter Warren or Gabe Hoy or Carson Van Lin, I thought it would push him and potentially he might not win that job because I didn't get a lot of great reviews out of Michigan for his time there, and he didn't play all that much. Stefano Millen was a 3-year starter at Kent State, whereas Alizio wasn't. In Michigan, he wasn't on that level. Now, he ended up starting every game last season, so that's either a reflection on him playing well or some of those other guys around him not practicing as well as him. But this year, Wilson, I guess if you were going to put odds on Caljic Wilson winning a starting job, you would say probably. You'd give him the best odds out of anybody, of him versus Carson Van Lin or Gabe Hoy or Matt Gonsalves or whoever. You would probably give Wilson the odds as the favorite, but I don't think it's a guarantee. I think Carson Van Lin has a lot of potential. Gabe Hoy, I don't know if he's going to be a tackle or guard. He's been at both in his career, but I think the coaches like him, and I think they want to get him on the field one way or the other. I think they feel like I think they will feel like he is one of their 5 best offensive linemen. So I think he'll be on the field, whether it's inside or outside. I think Grant Kerrigan's an interesting option as a guy who moved from tight end to offensive tackle. He's got a lot of extra time to bulk up now. I don't know if he's going to win a starting job, but I think there's competition there. So Van Lin, Kerrigan, Matt Gonsalves impressed a lot of people last year on the scout team as a freshman offensive tackle. Is a redshirt freshman going to win the job at right tackle? I don't think so, but I'm not going to rule it out. And so I think Caljic Wilson's going to have some stiff competition, whenever they actually start practicing this year, in the summer or whenever it is. So I'm not going to rule it. I think he's probably the favorite to win one of the tackle jobs, but I'm not going to guarantee it. Not going to hand it to him right off the bat because it's. I think there'll be some competition, and that's good. I think competition is a good thing to have, obviously. So let's check out here on the live stream some of the questions, comments coming in from the YouTube live stream. We appreciate everybody who's tuning in tonight. I know, we're taping this live stream and this podcast right during the Michael Jordan 30 for 30 or whatever it is on ESPN. And so I appreciate everybody who's tuning away from that and checking this out. And if you're listening to the podcast later, we appreciate that as well. Let's see. Who's got comments here? David says, you have to love getting 3 offensive line recruits in 2 days, all of which had multiple Power 5 schools pushing for them. I agree, David. I think is a good boost of, at a position where they need. I think they needed to load up on numbers. Like I said, they got 2 in each of the last 3 classes. You can't just recruit 2 offensive linemen every year. You need to boost your numbers up. You need to do better than that. And, just in terms of quantity, you need more bodies on the roster and the offensive line. Royce Beacom says, still stuck in 5th place in the ACC in recruiting in the team rankings. Can't believe North Carolina is ahead of Clemson right now. Yeah, Pitt, after all these commitments, they've got 12 now in the class of 2021. They're ranked 12th nationally, and as I'm taping this on Sunday night. And let's just check the ACC real quick just to see if those numbers have moved from what Royce said. Now, Pitt's 5th, and Clemson is actually ahead of North Carolina. On the Rivals.com recruiting rankings, Clemson is ahead of North Carolina. They're first. They've also got 10 recruits, and all 10 of them are 4-star prospects, whereas North Carolina has 14 commitments. 6 of them are 4-star prospects. So you can definitely tell who's got the better class there. How about this? Okay, I'm looking at the rest of the ACC. North Carolina has 6 4-stars. Miami has 5 4-stars. Virginia and Pitt have 1 each, so that's 13. Florida State has 2, that's 15, and Virginia Tech has 1, that's 16. So 13 of the teams in the ACC not named Clemson have a total of 16 4-star commitments. Clemson has 10 on its own. There's a bit of a divide in the conference. It's just a bit of a divide in the conference, and they're probably going to add some 5-star recruits to that list and whatnot. But look, if Pitt, so much of the recruiting rankings right now are based on quantity and the number of commitments you have, and so Pitt's at number 21 right now. As other school, with 12 commitments, as other schools get more commitments, those numbers are going to shift. Pitt's going to move up or Pitt's going to move down. N. Rummy asks, do you think any of the linemen make a big jump this year? And I think talking about the offensive linemen, I'm guessing he's talking about the offensive linemen in recruiting rankings. I mean, I think. I think all these guys have the potential to. I mean, it all depends on how much football is played and how they look on their senior film, but I think they have a potential to make some jumps. Right now, I mean, you need Pitt at the minimum to stay inside the top 35 nationally. You'd like them to be in the top 30 nationally. It's been a long time since Pitt has had a top 30 ranked class, somewhere 26, 24, 25, whatever it is. You'd like Pitt to be in that range and then see if you can get a couple guys to top it off and push you to a certain level. That's what you want to shoot for. Being at 21 on May 10th looks pretty good. That looks good. It's hard to argue with any of that. I'm guessing that won't stick, but it looks good for right now. Dan V says Narduzzi seems to have upped his recruiting game. Was something said to him, or is this a natural progression? I don't think there's any. Look, right now, Pitt's got a really good recruiting staff in place. I mean, I think that's where it starts. I think Pat Narduzzi is a good recruiter, but I think he's got some recruiting studs on his staff. The top 2 guys we've talked about are Charlie Partridge and Chris Beatty. Those guys are big-time recruiters. The guys that every year you're going to have to fend off other schools when they come and try and hire those guys away on their recruiting reputation alone. And Partridge is a hell of a defensive line coach, too. I think Chris Beatty might be pretty good at coaching receivers as well. But those guys are studs. And then you've got some other guys that are kind of popping up there looking pretty good on their own. Corey Sanders, I think, is really making some inroads this year. Archie Collins, man, Sunday was Archie Collins Day. It's Mother's Day, but it was Archie Collins Day. So he's also making a little progress. And say what you want about Tim Salem, and look, he's got to do a better job getting tight ends, but that guy's responsible for North Jersey. He's responsible for New York City. He's responsible for New England. And in those areas, we're talking about Kenny Pickett, Nick Patty, Jason Pinnock, Israel Abanikanda, A.J. Roberts. They've gotten a decent number of guys out of North Jersey, New York City, New England in the last couple of years. And some pretty good players. And Tim Salem gets credit for them. I think Dave Borbley's connecting well with offensive line recruits. I think Andre Powell is still a really good recruiter. He's getting overshadowed a bit because Chris Beatty's killing it in Virginia. But Andre Powell handling, kind of North Virginia and more so D.C. and Maryland, I think he's a good recruiter. I think he does a good job for Pitt and does a good job with running backs. They've got some good and Rob Harley too. I was trying to think. I was like, is there a coach I didn't mention just now? I think Rob Harley's a good recruiter as well. I think they've got a really good recruiting staff, and I think that's paying off. I think also the recruiting guys behind the scenes, the recruiting assistants, Graham Wilbert and Carlos Ovco and Mickey Jacobs. I mean, I think those guys, and Adam Calteri is another one. Calteri, they've got some really good people working in that department right now. Guys who work their tails off and just sort of are endlessly inventing new things to do to connect with the recruits and get them to keep thinking about Pitt and get them to keep connecting with Pitt. And they're doing a good job. And then you add in the totally unprecedented upside down world of recruiting right now, which is, kind of par for the course with our totally upside down world of everything the way it is right now. And a lot of recruits are speeding up their recruiting process. A lot of recruits are making decisions sooner because they just don't know what the next 4 months are going to bring, or the next 6 months, or the next 2 months, or the next 1 month. And they don't know. So they're adjusting their approach to the recruiting process, and they're committing a lot earlier. And it's Pitt, where they've got 12 commitments by May 10th, which is totally unprecedented. And it's across the country. You see commitments all over the place. And Pitt is certainly capitalizing on the situation. They're not the only ones, but they're definitely capitalizing. So you have a lot of factors, Dan, when it comes down to it. You have a lot of factors affecting this recruiting run that they're on right now, and the result is they're doing well out there. All right, Derek Tan says, what positions are the staff going to focus on recruiting this summer? It's funny enough. They need to focus on defense a little bit. They need some more defensive linemen. They need some more defensive backs in this class. They've got 12 recruits, but kind of the bulk of the class is on offense right now, which I don't think we would have said that any time in the recent past about Pitt recruiting under Pat Narduzzi. They've got a quarterback. They've got a running back. They've got 2 receivers, and I think they'll take one more at each of those positions. They've got 4 offensive linemen. They need a tight end or 2 or 8, obviously. But they really need to load up on defense. They need more linebackers, more D linemen, and more defensive backs. They've got 12 commitments. I think they could take like another 12. So they've got room to add a bunch of guys, and I think they will. I don't know if they'll get them all over the summer, but I think they'll get more before this month is over. They might get more before before this next week is over. We'll have to see. All right, last question. Kyle Stanzel asks, do you think the current Pitt staff is better at recruiting or player development? I don't know, Kyle. That's a good question. It's a tough question for me to answer. Because I don't know. I don't know. So like if I want to evaluate how staff, Kyle, we're going to go down a long path here. If I want to evaluate how a staff is at developing a player, some of that opinion is going to come back to what I think a player's potential is at the time they're getting recruited, right? Like, if they exceed my expectations, then I would say, yeah, that staff is good at developing players. But, like, who the hell am I? I don't know if my expectations matter all that much. And I don't know, I even have a hard time looking at it and saying, oh, they took this 2-star prospect and made him into this. They took Dane Jackson and coached him into an NFL draft pick. I mean, is that player development? Did they just identify something? The guy committed to Paul Christ, and then Pat Narduzzi held on to him. I don't know. I I have a hard time with evaluating it. But I mean, it's the other half of the equation. I mean, one half of the equation is finding those guys and getting them on campus, and the other half is coaching them up and developing them into good college football players. I don't know if I don't have any answer for you on that. Some guys have developed well, some guys haven't. Some positions have developed well, some haven't. I think their defensive line position development is pretty darn good. Their offensive line position development needs to show some positive signs this season. This season, right now, needs to get better. All right, I think we'll wrap it up here. I thought, well, maybe we'll talk for 15 or 20 minutes. Here we are, we're pushing 35. But hey, when you get 4 commitments over a weekend, what are you going to do? You got to get together and talk about it. So thanks everybody for tuning in to the live stream here. Make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We've had coverage. Look, not only have we had coverage of the recruits this weekend when they committed, we told you all through the week about who was committing and who, where we expected them to go, and the fact that we thought Pitt had a good chance. I mean, we set the table for you. Sunday was probably pretty exciting for you because Pitt got commitments, but it might not have been quite as exciting because you knew all these things were coming. You had a pretty good idea if you were reading Panther-Lair.com. So go to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news, football, basketball, and recruiting. And we had a lot of football recruiting coverage over the weekend. We had a lot of basketball recruiting coverage over the weekend. We got some great basketball stuff coming next week. You got to stay tuned to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. If you're still on the live stream, and even if you're not, go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Click subscribe. We need the subscribers on the YouTube page. I want to see those numbers go up. I want to see where we can get this YouTube page too. I enjoy doing these live streams. I enjoy doing these videos, and I think people enjoy watching them, so I appreciate you doing that. Just click subscribe. It doesn't take anything. We really appreciate it, and that'll help us try and achieve our goals here on this Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel. So we'll be back on Tuesday night at 8:30, as we always are, for another live stream podcast. We'll release a podcast of that on Wednesday morning, and we'll have our Panthers Insider Show on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan, and of course, stay tuned to the website throughout the week. Thanks for tuning in here on Sunday night. Thanks for listening to the podcast whenever you listen to it, and we will talk to you again soon.